We had a meeting with the Executive Vice President of Emerson, the top 500 Fortune company. He mentioned that they will be downscaling their investments in Southeast Asia, particularly China, because from their perspective, the economic bubble has already burst. Given that scenario, could you please tell us your prognosis of how this will impact on the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea issues? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. By the way, a lot of the things that are happening now are happening in spite of the Philippines. In other words, make no mistake about it, the Philippines may be a factor, but it may not necessarily be a dominant factor in the decisions to be made by the powers that be, especially the United States. It will be their interest. But here, we have to remember that we're talking of a class of opinions between the defense security strategists and businessmen. You know, one of the persons that President Xi Jinping will be meeting is Tim Cook of Apple. And you know, Apple is quite an influential group. His first stop is in Seattle, where Seattle was supposed to be a sister city when President Xi Jinping was just a mayor of a city in China. So they have this some kind of a bond. Boeing aircraft will be in the picture. Maybe Boeing would like to sell more planes to China. Apple would like to sell more iPhone 6 and 6S to China. So it's business. In fact, in the book, the next century, it was mentioned that one of the factors that make the situation today different from how it was in the Second World War and even in the First World War is that now the businessmen are very predominant in the decision-making process. Some senators owe them, President owes them in terms of political contributions. They would have to say. Local people would also want to have more businesses in China. China is a major trade partner, same with Australia. So this is a very complicated situation, but there is that push also coming from the military, and they're worried that if they don't take any action, then by the original prognosis that was that by 2016, next year, China will become the #1 economy of the world. And psychologically, the Americans don't want that to happen. Maybe they have been slowed down by what happened economically in the recent events in China. Japan is supposed to be moving towards other Southeast Asian countries instead of China. So I guess there will be a realignment here. But that realignment is going to be decided not just by the U.S. policymakers, but the businessmen are going to be very much in the picture. And that is the reason why so many U.S. businessmen are going to be there, meeting with President Xi Jinping. And of course, for business. And that is the factor that will have to be considered in relation to the pressure being exerted by the Pentagon and the U.S. Senate with regards to U.S. policy in the South China Sea and in regard to China. So the dynamics are very complicated. That's what I can say. And of course, if it is a Republican president, maybe we can expect more action. But we have a Democrat, and someone was to make good this Nobel Prize for Peace. So that's another factor that we have to consider. So that's probably one of the reasons why, in spite of all the statements from Secretary Carter, from Admiral Harris, they're still not, they've been threatening to enter the 12-mile nautical zone of the artificial island. So they haven't done it, not yet.
Next question.
Chester Palazza from NDCP. 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago, we saw that the People's Liberation Army was considered the boxers suffering from short arms and slow feet.
Excuse me, can you speak loud? Medyo magarang ako.
Okay, sir. 3 or 4 decades ago, the People's Liberation Army was considered as a boxer suffering from short arms and slow feet. We saw this military transformation during the time of Jiang Zemin, during the latter part of his presidency. And at the time, we also saw the robust relations of China and the Philippines between Jiang Zemin and President Ramos. And at the time, Ramos and Jiang Zemin were singing along together, and we see all these good relationships. And right now, we see in the People's Liberation Army a shift from coastal defense or land focus to offshore defense or ocean focused strategy, while the AFP is also transitioning from this ISO to territorial defense. And during the time of Ramos, he proposed the AFP modernization process law. Right now we see this revised AFP modernization under Aquino. My question is, if we have properly implemented the AFP modernization law during the time of Ramos, could we have achieved the credible defense posture that we are aiming today?
Well, yeah, very, very sadly, I was one of the co-authors of the AFP modernization program. And when we came out with that, we were so ecstatic. We said, well, we are going back to maybe the time of the 50s when the Philippine Air Force was one of the most respected in Asia. Back maybe to 1969 when Malaysia accused us of bullying them. There was even a press release article where Malaysia was saying that the Philippine Air Force was bullying the Malaysian Navy. That was established as late as 1969. My thinking was this: if only all presidents of the Philippines, from the time, let's say, of President Magsaysay to President Garcia, made it a point to have this systematic addition to our defense capability. Maybe a brigade here, maybe after the F6, F5s, maybe some more additional planes. Just making sure that each president contributed something to modernize the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Air Force, and of course the Philippine Army. Then we would not have to confront what I call, in the civilian, like if you're running a fleet, you call it black obsolescence, where all of a sudden all the units of your fleet become obsolete at the same time because you bought them at the same time without a systematic replacement program. So that's what we witnessed, black obsolescence. All of a sudden the F5s disappeared. Just like that, without any replacement. If we bought, let's say 10 years or 5 years after the first batch of F5, we had new planes. I remember in the 50s we had the Mustangs, then the F-86, the Sabre jets. We had them. We had one of the best acrobatic Air Force acrobatic team, the Blue Diamonds, and it impressed. I remember seeing a movie during the 50s when President Garcia was the president, and everybody was here. A lot of delegations from all over the world watching an air show by the Philippine Air Force. Now it will be just air and no show. Because of this black obsolescence. But if after the passage of the AFP modernization program, President Ramos made it a point to make sure that we had maybe 1 or 2 additional frigates, maybe 6 or 12 new planes, whatever. We were talking Cape Fear at that time, $7 million per copy instead of $30 million for an F-15. or a 15, and maybe even have a decent airport, and then followed by President Erap Estrada and President GMA. They will have a decent defense capability. But, you know, things stopped, and now we're hit by black obsolescence.
Yes, Mr. Roilo, then the question after that will come from this side of the bill.
Thank you, sir. Sir from NDCP. This morning, sir, our group find it hard to put into language our courses of action regarding increasing defense spending. And being a former congressman yourself, sir, how would you help us craft a good course of action with regard to increasing our defense spending? As we all know, our neighboring countries are continuing building up and modernizing its defense.
I cited the example of Vietnam. The economy is much smaller than our economy. They don't have the $23 billion inflow from our overseas workers. They don't have the $20 billion earning from our BPO, increasing by 17% per annum. In about 2 years, the two will be equal already. So BPO will be maybe about 12%. Business process outsourcing will be 12% of our GDP, plus another 12% from the OW. So sure sources of revenue. Then there's the Malampaya Fund, 130 billion the last time I looked. I don't know how much it is now. 130 billion, which according to a legal luminary, no less than a member of the Supreme Court said, could be used to enhance our defense capability, especially in the West Philippine Sea, because that is money from an energy project, but an energy project needs security, and it will be compatible to use that to develop our Navy in an area, maybe missile boats, as well as an array of missiles and even planes. 130 billion can go a long way, maybe just part of that. But we allocated 3 years ago the amount of 75 billion for a 5-year modernization program. But 75 billion cannot go very far. In my opinion, we have to be more aggressive in the funding. But you know, just like anything else, we know from Samuelson's book, Economics, that there's always a trade-off between water and guns. And that's exactly how President Ramos explained why they did not allocate any money for our AFP modernization, because they said they wanted to develop the economy first. And at that time, remember, people were not yet so worried about external defense. That was the difference 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Now, external defense is our major concern. It's not anymore internal defense. So we have to realign also the strategizing our defense capability.
Maybe we can have questions from this side. Any volunteers? Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm Colonel Lorin from the Strategic Studies of the AFP. Sir, of course, everybody needs China, being an economic heavyweight. But I'm just concerned about how have we projected the Philippines' image before the international community. That in our arbitration case with China, how do you think we're projected as, are we seen by the international community as a spoiler of a party called China, or does the international community, while they're seated on the sideline, they see us as applauding for the smaller David and trying to compel China, who is the bigger Goliath, to conform to international laws? Thank you.
But it depends on where you're coming from. Some people, even here in the Philippines, would rather that we engage China economically. And I think we can. These are two separate things. I made a study when I was a congressman on how China deals with countries that are in conflict with them. For example, in the case of Vietnam, Taiwan. And I saw that there is no correlation between economic activity and a security or political conflict. In other words, business goes on. And